Anyone have a boyfriend or a girlfriend in middle school? Come on, raise your hand. Loud and proud. I remember my girlfriends in middle school. Had a bunch. One in particular I remember. We will say her name was Claire. She was nice enough, but was one of those girls you knew liked you, but you didn't really like her. But I knew if I ever asked her to be my girlfriend, she would say yes. So one day, we had class in the library and we were flirting. I think we were playing footsies under the table in the library and laughing. Then we sat next to each other and we almost held hands. Then I figured, what the hey, I'll ask her to be my girlfriend. No big deal, it won't get too serious. So I wrote it on a piece of paper. Will you go out with me? Will you go out with me? What the heck does that mean? I mean, we aren't going anywhere, we're only 12 years old, right? Anyways, class ends and we part ways with a smile. And I head home on the bus. I decided to call her that night because I have news. I want to break up. I thought, what the hey? I didn't really want to be her boyfriend. I just had a good moment and asked her out. So I called. She was excited to hear from me. We talked for a bit. Then I got to the point. Claire, I don't want to go out anymore. She cried on the phone. Terrible, right? So I had a busy night and I had no time to console her, so I just said bye. And some of you ladies are thinking, wow, what a jerk. And you're right. There is a point to this crazy story, though. The point is, sometimes we misjudge a situation. Sometimes something looks one way, like it's not a big deal and casual. Sometimes that something is a big deal and it's serious. Have you ever done this before? You ever been in a situation that you thought was casual when it ended up being serious? Maybe it was a dating relationship you were in. You thought it was moving slowly, like you were friends who were considering becoming something more, but then you find out that the other person has told all their friends that they are deeply in love with you. And you get this jolt and realize this is a bigger deal than I thought. We have a tendency to do this, think things are casual when things are actually way more serious. We misjudge a situation. And the truth is, sex and sexuality falls into this category. Sex is often misjudged. Sex is often thought of casual as not a big deal. We treat sex this way. And if it's true that sex is in fact casual, then why doesn't it always feel casual? I mean, we may want to believe that sex is casual, but sex is a big deal. And chances are you already know that. You know it because when you slept with your boyfriend, things changed between you and him. You felt more vulnerable. You felt more insecure. You felt like more was on the line, more was at stake after having taken that step. You know sex isn't casual because you saw the way your dad's affair broke up your family. You know that if sex were casual, then you wouldn't be spending every other weekend with your mom because of what sex did to tear your family apart. This debate about sex being casual or serious, it's been going on for centuries. And when the Christian church got started, sex was a question that new believers wrestled with. The people who were converting to this new religion, they were curious about what it would require from them, how it would change their lives and relationships. And the Christians who lived in the city of Corinth faced even more challenges. You see, Corinth, it was a party town. Think anything goes, and I mean anything. So when the Apostle Paul wrote to the Christ followers in Corinth, he was writing to people who lived in a world that said sex was casual. A world where there were no sexual boundaries. Paul writes to them and he says this, "Don't you realize that your bodies are actually parts of Christ? Should a man take his body, which is part of Christ, and join it to a prostitute? Never. And don't you realize that if a man joins himself to a prostitute, he becomes one body with her? For the scriptures say, the two are united into one, but the person who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body. Don't you realize that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who lives in you and was given to you by God? You do not belong to yourself, for God bought you with a high price. So you must honor God with your body." Paul, he didn't avoid talking about the obvious. He wasn't willing to overlook something that other people didn't really think was that big of a deal. Can you hear his insistence? In another version, Paul says, there is more to sex than skin on skin. He says our bodies were made for God-given and God-modeled love, and that God paid a high price for you. There may have been some people thinking, what does that have to do with this place, with this church, or with God? And Paul's saying it has a lot to do with it, because there's one underlying theme. Sex is not casual. Sex is serious. Even if you wouldn't call yourself a Christian, even if you are here for the first time and hearing those verses for the first time, sex is still serious. Because what Paul is saying is true for everyone, even you. Sex is something that involves your own body, every part of you, the whole of you. And when you have sex, you put yourself at risk, all of you. And you put the other person at risk too. That's why sexual purity is so important. And maybe some of you know this, but only because you figured it out the difficult way. You realized this with your own actions, or you realized it because of someone else's actions and how they've affected you. Maybe you messed up. You went too far. You realized that sex isn't casual because of the fallout. Maybe you felt hurt, lonely, betrayed, guilty. All those emotions, they're not casual. Or maybe you're living in the midst of a relational fallout because of an affair that rocked your family. You feel angry, wounded, and maybe even bitter. Those emotions aren't casual either. And the truth is, God never intended for you to experience those emotions. Not when it comes to sex. And the fact that we do feel those emotions, it just proves that sex is serious. Realizing this about sex means we start to treat it differently. We cannot compartmentalize sex and pretend that our emotions and our spirits are not involved. I bet if you ask anyone who's experienced sex, whether or not it's casual, they would say that it's not casual. But why? We are more than just physical beings. When it comes to what makes us who we are as individuals, we are more complex than that. We're physical, we're emotional, and we're spiritual. We're physical, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's the part of us that is engaged when we hold hands, when we make out, or have sex. We're emotional. It's the part of us that feels, telling us that we're in love, and we're spiritual. It's the part that relates to God and is engaged when talking about meaning and purpose for our lives. This is why sex is serious. And it's why sex is ideal within the context of marriage. Not because you want to enjoy sex now, or because you want to feel connected to someone, but because sex is physical, emotional, and it's spiritual. And it needs to be experienced in the safety of marriage, in the way it was intended to be, because too much is on the line to treat it casually or outside of a committed marriage relationship. Because sex is not casual. Chances are, there's more than a handful of you in here who have crossed lines you did not want to cross. Or maybe you've crossed lines you did want to cross at the time, but now you feel the guilt. Now you feel the shame, and you feel like you're lost because of choices you made in the past. Yes, God takes sex seriously because He knows how much is on the line. He doesn't want you to experience the raw, hurtful emotions that come with mistreating sex. But for those of you who have made some mistakes in the past when it comes to sex, there's good news. God takes forgiveness seriously too. God isn't casual about forgiveness. Psalms 130 verse 4 says, "But with you there is forgiveness, therefore you are feared." God is always a God of forgiveness no matter what the offense is. I want you to leave here today acknowledging that sex is a big deal. It's okay that you don't treat it as lightly as your peers do. It's okay that you're having a hard time dealing with the fallout of sexual mistakes in your past. It is okay if at one time you approached sex casually, only to find that it affected you far more than you would ever have realized. Sex, it's serious.